Hello everyone, and thank you to Hildegun and the two Simones and Sabines for having me here. It's a real honor, and I must preface this that I feel that we're at the very start of our journey. My name is Diana Campbell Betancourt. I'm the artistic director of the Samdani Art Foundation and the chief curator of the Dhaka Art Summit. The foundation is only 5 years old, and I have so much to learn from all of you, and we're very open to collaborating. I figured that before going into all of this, I would start with the Dhaka Art Summit, which many of you are more familiar with, and it was my experience with this, which was the genesis for the Samdani seminars. The summit started in 2012, and the Samdani seminars were kind of an idea that came up in 2014 and had its first iteration in 2015. So the Dhaka Art Summit is the world's largest research and exhibition platform for South Asian art. I think the big question in this room is funding, and I'm in a very different position from many people here because I'm privately funded by a young couple named Rajiv and Nadia Samdani. They're very young. He's 44, she's 34. They basically created this foundation because they're also collectors, and museums from around the world would come to them saying they wanted to do things with South Asia, and they realized that South Asia to them meant India, and there was no knowledge about Bangladesh, Myanmar, Afghanistan, a little bit Pakistan, but there was a real need to do something to have people learn about Bangladesh. And what's interesting is I still have people thinking that Dhaka is Dakar. So there is a lot of work to do on this front. So basically, the summit brings together art that's connected to the region. We exhibit art from across the region and bring hundreds of people working across this region together in Dhaka as a new center for this. The exhibition is not a biennial, but it's a biennial platform. It happens every 2 years. We not only exhibit art from the region, but also art with ties to it, such as Linda Benglis. She has had a studio in India since 1979, and her work is very influenced by things there. So my point of bringing this up is that South Asia is a global zone of contact. If you're only looking at these countries on this map, you're missing other key elements, such as some that came up in Regina's presentation yesterday. Teachers such as Stella Kramrich or Anna Mulka Ahmed in Pakistan, who set up the Faculty of Fine Arts at the University of Punjab in 1940. She was Russian and Polish. Or if you're even looking at Salima Hashmi, who's one of the leading educators in Pakistan, her mother was British. So I think that there are, in an era of rising nationalism, it's really important to look at these other positions. And I also bring this up because as a South Asian exhibition platform, that really limits my ability to bring in figures such as, the contemporary version of Stella, whose ideas might be relevant to the region, but who might not have engaged yet. So diving into the summit, this edition that happened in 2016, we brought for the first time critical writing within the fold of the exhibition structure, and this was born from a conversation I had with Katya Garcia Anton at OCA, and we had this conversation in India, where she was interested in setting up an itinerant critical writing school. So we brought together 25 writers from across the world whose ideas were pertinent to the region to discuss issues on topics ranging from writing within and against the art school, but also alternative formats of critical writing, such as letters. Another key thing about the summit and the Samdani seminars and everything we do at the foundation is it's completely free. There's no tuition fees for anyone. It's open to the public, ticketless. And this last edition of the summit saw 138,000 local visitors in 4 days. So our audience numbers are huge. And this also translates into the seminar program, which I'll talk about in a minute. We had 3,000 plus school children, 800 international arts professionals, and basically with our school program, which is something we get a lot of compliments for, we bring together schools of all backgrounds, from underprivileged schools in villages to international schools. All the children have guided tours. The teachers get the exhibition guides 2 weeks in advance so they can prepare. We have bilingual texts, and the artists or the students all have workshops with artists. And this is very important. The other thing I didn't really mention is while this is a private foundation, this is a public program because it's an official collaboration with the Minister of Culture and the Bangladesh Shilpakala Academy. We collaborate, while the government is not involved at all in content, they're very much our collaborator in terms of venue, security, all these other things. And the cultural minister says that it's culture that keeps us secular. So especially in moments like now, that we have to put a huge emphasis on this kind of education. This is an image from the 2014 summit, and this is an image from a 9-hour durational performance by Nikhil Chopra. And what I think is interesting here is, he started off almost completely naked. People think that, this is an Islamic country. Bangladesh is technically a secular country, but, no one had problems with this. But people they didn't really understand this kind of performance, and we saw a need to kind of, how do you say, push the understanding of the kind of practices that we're seeing internationally or even in India that people might not be familiar with in Bangladesh. So just to kind of sum this up, like, Dhaka Art Summit has existed as kind of a free and expanded school. From this, I started to think about what about, I talked about programs for children, programs for writers, there's a lot of curatorial training as well, but what about for the local artists or the young artists in art schools? The artists that I had mentioned before, such as Nikhil Chopra, Iftikhar Dadi, whose work was this light sculpture that you see here, or Sandeep Mukherjee, all of these artists have teaching practices. So how could I engage these artists more deeply with an informal education program to nurture the environment that the young and emerging artists and art students are operating in? I now take a bit of a pause to give you a little bit of background of what the kind of bastions of power in the local pedagogical system are. So the first image at the top is an image of the Faculty of Fine Arts at the University of Dhaka, which is kind of known as Charukala. It was founded in 1948 by Zainul Abidin. It has some similarities with Shantiniketan in terms of an emphasis on folk and craft and the local, but this is a government school. It still has a deep influence of Tagore, so it's one of I think it's the only school in South Asia that still teaches Oriental art, which came from the Bengal school. But they don't consider photography to be art. Video definitely isn't art. Performance isn't art. The teachers are political appointees, and it's extremely hierarchical. Then at the bottom, you have a picture of an incredible school that's called Pathshala. And so the long name is the Pathshala South Asian Institute of Photography, which was founded by an artist in 1998. The school is private, they have tuition fees, but it's extremely documentary focused. Like, they're moving away from that, but, they're sort of, they're gearing their artists to try to win World Press Photo Prizes. And they also don't have access to the classical education that you see at Charukala. And these two groups of students and alumni don't get together, they don't mix. And there's also tons of artist-led initiatives by graduates of both of these schools. But the situation in any small art scene is so political that these different groups of people aren't coming together. So I figured that I should create something that could bring these different groups together by looking at gaps in all of the curriculums and the programs. So I started with performance because given the performance program in the summit, I could see that there's a lot of artists wanting to engage with performance. Part of it being that in a poor country where there's not a lot of material costs, there's nowhere to store anything. It's an easy example, but there wasn't any kind of critical training or understanding as to what this was. So kind of the terms on here were coming from some of Chantal Pombriand's texts, but we decided to open this up to people who were not necessarily from a fine art background, but people such as musicians or dancers who might have been exposed to performance but not as a fine art form. We had an open call for applications. We got hundreds of applications, and we let the artist tutors select who would be in their programs. But there was also a mix. Some of the lectures were completely open to the public. So this was a lecture performance by Nikhil Chopra, which actually this was hilarious. He performed as an Italian curator who was coming to describe his friend Nikhil Chopra's work. And as you can see, so Nikhil's originally from Kashmir. You can't really tell, like he could look like an Italian. He spoke in an Italian accent. We actually had people asking how he had got there, how he knew Nikhil. And people they had seen him perform in the summit before, so everyone had been familiar with his work. So this was kind of an introduction to this, and then he went into a week-long body workshop with selected participants. So it was him, a Slovenian collaborator named Jana Prepula, and his partner Madhavi Gore. So they led these intensive body workshops, which served to kind of incubate durational performance. And we also had, so Paolo Althamer came, and he was doing draftsmen's congresses and other workshops at the Faculty of Fine Arts, University of Dhaka. The other thing I should say is that our programs, we operate in all of these different spaces. We work at the government art school, we work at Pathshala, the photography school, we work at a lot of the individual artists run initiatives, because we don't currently have our own permanent space. Our space will open at the end of 2018. But we also think if we're trying to engage all these different communities, it's important to involve all of them in various ways. Powell also did a Draftsman Congress, so this is the site of our future space in Sylhet with the Village Kids, and he's coming back to do some workshops with a drug rehab center in Sylhet following his teaching program with the Neue Lipia group in Poland. Miriam Lefkowitz, who is a Franco-American performance artist, did some workshops, and this was in the old city of Dhaka, and while this was to the participants, people in the park started joining in. It was an interesting dynamic, but this was basically about attention studies and the body and power dynamics. So this was another workshop that we did. Tori Vranes, who's a Norwegian artist, came and did some workshops on voice and movement, and they also cast and collaborated with rickshaw drivers. So here they're driving around in the Academy for Fine and Performing Arts called the Shilpakala Academy, throwing their voice across the space. Sandeep Mukherjee, who teaches at Pomona College, he is James Turrell's former position, was talking about painting in the body, and while he's known as a painter, performance is very much a part of the practice. Sandra Turgeman and Gregory Castera came and presented a project that they had been doing with Tariq Atoui, looking at how deaf people perceive sound and teaching different research methodologies. And this was an initial trip for them because they're doing a research inquiry into climate change, which Bangladesh is a key place to visit if you're interested in that. So we had an open, so this series of events spanned it was about a 3-week intensive program, and then there was an open house with some of the durational performances that had been incubated in this process. So this was, I don't think the video is going to work, it's short anyway. This was a performance by an artist called Ali Asghar, and a lot of these artists are quite young, and some of them, so for example, this artist, Kabir Ahmed Masum Chishti, he's mostly known for his drawings, but they have a performative element that he hadn't really explored before. But these kind of experiments were incubated by Nikhil Chopra over a course of 1.5 years because he was the performance curator for the Dhaka Art Summit. So you saw some of that input coming out in the performances by some of the artists in the Dhaka Art Summit. And moving forward, I think the other thing I should say was the Samdani seminars was really something that I felt was necessary to bridge a gap I saw between what we were doing in the exhibition of the summit and how we were engaging with the local art scene. So it really kind of started, I really had to kind of push the patrons to back me on this, if this makes sense. And they're now very convinced about the program, and we're going to be adding more resources and energy to this. I can't really talk about the 2017 program now, but I think speaking to the 2018 summit, this kind of expanded school or Samdani seminars will also be a part of the next summit. And thank you very much for your time and attention.